Welcome back to the United Pubcast, the podcast of the official Man United Supporters Club here in Sydney for a return of the United Pubcast. It feels like an age since I have been on, Larry. You obviously did the Friday night point last week. And since I've last spoken, obviously football has been cancelled. Seems that happened last year or the year before. I lost track of it all through COVID. There was postponements and behind closed doors football. Seems we have returned to those days. Obviously, unfortunate circumstances. Obviously, the situation sort of occurring in England at the moment in regards to the Queen and obviously her funeral coming up. And it has thrown a huge spanner in the works in football, unfortunately, but those are the cards we have been dealt with. So we'll get a little bit tonight. Obviously, there is no football to discuss, but around Manchester United, Larry, there is always no shortage of topics. So we will go through a couple of things and some interesting bits of news that are popping up around Man United at the moment. So it'd be good to get everyone's thoughts in the live chat. But before we get to everyone in the chat, Larry, talk to me. How's things? You have a good weekend?
Yeah, it's been difficult without the football, hasn't it? I found myself watching rugby league. I found myself watching UFC, just trying to fill up the time, Tom, with no football. And it's on the decision itself, I think it's worth giving some attention to it. And I obviously provided some of my thoughts on the Friday night pint. But what have you made of it? Because I really thought, irrespective of your opinion on, political aspects or whether you're a fan of the royal family or not, it's almost comical, right? The fact that you could have paid tribute to the Queen in so many different ways, and just completely take away something, particularly through COVID, like you mentioned.
I think that's the thing. If COVID taught us one thing, now there was many issues arose from the pandemic, but if it taught us one thing, when times are tough, and let's say this is a tough time, obviously people in England take the royal family very seriously. Let's say this is a tough thing for people in England. The last thing you do, and COVID's taught us this, don't take away the enjoyment from people. If someone enjoys football, let them have football. The moment you take things away from people in difficult times, that is when issues sort of arise. The issue in the pandemic wasn't the virus. It was the knock-on effect of everything else. And I think that we need to learn from that. And look, okay, we're missing 1 week of football. Okay, maybe we're a little bit selfish in regards to Emat here. I found out I've got a wife and 3 kids. Who are you kidding? There has been some news popping around the house, obviously. Sad to say good day to some people. But on that, mate, we'll say good day to everyone in the live chat. George here, good to see you, mate. And obviously Emat as well. But if you are in the live chat, do get all your thoughts and topics in on everything we do discuss as we go on, because there is no football to discuss. But as I said, there's no shortage of topics, but we'll stay on that sort of postponement, Larry. And in regards to that, yes, okay, as football fans, we're selfish. What if we missed a couple of days of football? We're missing 1 game, 2 games. They're going to be added on, whether before Christmas or after Christmas. We're going to get these games back. But before we get into the actual fixture pile-up and what that means for Manchester United and performances later on down the track, you talk about you have nothing to do over the weekend, and I find myself exactly in the same boat. Nothing to do over the weekend. Emad's found a wife. You've found different sports in rugby league. And we sit here and find, are we a bit too selfish? Okay, for whatever reason, if a game gets postponed, hopefully it's not in unfortunate circumstances like we find ourselves in now. But we miss 1 game of football and everyone says, I'll go get a life. Well, my life is Manchester United. My life is football. But you kind of feel a little bit, not down, but a little bit, not embarrassed, but a little bit embarrassed thinking, God, what do I do with myself? Do I live for this a little bit too much? When it's taken away for 3 or 4 days, I don't know what to do with myself. But I think I'm not the only one in that category.
For those listening to this, Tom does have a wife who he's been married to for 6 odd years, and he also has a dog and a pet turtle, which he obviously hasn't found over the weekend. Oh.
Well, the dog's having a nap here. He's keeping me good company throughout this tough period in the Simpson household. Emad here saying it's killed our momentum in the league. We'll get into actual football discussion in regards to it, Larry. It's a nightmare because there is no space to put these fixtures in there. I think the only potential situation arising at the moment is if, let's say, Leeds and Manchester United get knocked out of the League Cup. Maybe there's a situation in the 4th round of the League Cup you could squeeze a game in potentially there. The only other gap is extend the season by a week come May.
So the window where they could potentially do it, this is where United really need to finish top of the Europa League group. Because let's not forget, if United finish second, They have to go into a round of 32. So perhaps that week where the round of 32 games are getting played, that could potentially be an option. Because then you could throw in the extra league game or league game or 2 there. You're right. I think the league will end up getting extended out, or you're going to find it's going to be a chaotic end to the season in what's already such a congested calendar with the World Cup. Look, I think on Emad's point, That's why this season is so hard to predict. I genuinely believe that this season could be the wildest in the sense of you almost have the season split in two. You've got the August to December, and I think after the World Cup, now how particularly the top clubs or the big clubs, I should say, how do they come out of the World Cup? Because you've got massive players who could pick up injuries, who could have a World Cup fatigue, lag, whatever you want to call it. Because a lot of them, it's not just the physical aspects. A lot of emotion goes into playing a World Cup. I think there has to be a come down from that. We saw Jesse Lingard fall off a cliff after the 2018 World Cup. If you remember, his form was elite for Manchester United prior to that under Jose Mourinho. The World Cup happened and he fell off a cliff. So it could really go either way. It's really difficult to say and to predict. So many aspects in terms of the games, in terms of the mentality. So it'll be really interesting to see how United and the other clubs come out of it.
Well, you mentioned other clubs, and here George makes a point. Proper squad depth is key. This is why I like City's bench, and that obviously will play a huge part the longer this season goes on. You're just seeing at the moment, you look at Liverpool at the moment, we've sort of praised Liverpool so much over the last season or two. You start to look at their bench and think, oh, hang on, maybe Liverpool aren't as strong as we once thought. You take Sadio Mane out there, okay, who comes in to replace? And suddenly you do look at that. Maybe that is why Manchester City have been the most successful, because they've got nothing but sheer quality coming off the bench. But in regards to the actual decision to make this postponement, we can look at the ramifications it has on United and whatever club. Let's obviously have a selfish look at it in regards to United, but the Premier League's decision, because the information that has come out, it looks like, and who knows how accurate these facts are, but the information we have suggests that the government said, which we've seen with cricket, you can play these games, go ahead and have these games. However, our advice is to have a bit of a mourning period. Now, this is obviously to that first weekend of our match against Crystal Palace. The advice was to postpone it. The Premier League took that advice and postponed it. Now they're trying to get these matches back sort of intact and on track to be happening. Obviously, Chelsea-Liverpool is a big game in London, which has issues. There's a security risk, which they're talking logistical issues with Man United and Leeds. Obviously, the police going down to London. But the Premier League's decision to postpone these games, especially this first week, do they have, I don't want to say blood on their hands, but in regards to, not taking an easy route, they've made their job harder because they're going to have to fit these fixtures in later on. They've pissed off all the clubs in regards to the clubs didn't want to postpone it. The clubs wanted to continue on to sort of escape a potential fixture pile up, look down the track. And I just think it was a non-decision for the Premier League. As soon as the government said you can have these games, I thought, definite. They're 100% going to play them because it just made no sense at all. No one can give me a good reason. If you think football fans should have sat there over the weekend with their head bowed and sort of sit and reflect and not watch any TV, not go to restaurants and just mourn the Queen's passing, that's wrong. That football fans and people in general aren't going to do that. So to take away football, I thought when the government said by all means go and play these games, I was shocked by the Premier League's decision.
I 100% agree with you, Tom. I thought it was really weak leadership by the Premier League. I'm not familiar with who's the chairman and who's the CEO and who's got the deciding factor. There was some talk that there was a member of the royal family who's part of the FA or the EFL. I can't confirm that, but I'm with you. I just thought if you were really there were mixed reports coming out, and apparently the number one concern was people making noise or whatever during the national anthem or during moments of silence. Seriously, if that's the reason you're going to postpone games, it's embarrassing. If people are mature enough to understand, all right, it's just a section. You're going to have a section full of idiots in any walk of life, let alone a football pitch, particularly when you get drunk people into a football stadium, all right? No one is small-minded enough to think. And if the Premier League thought that would be an embarrassment on their product, what's more embarrassing is, like you say, let's not also forget the amount of fans who probably have traveled overseas, all over the world, to attend these games, who would have paid thousands upon thousands of dollars for hotels to attend the match.
A good mate of ours, Ian from Perth, his brother is over there for the Leeds match, postponed.
There you go. And these guys are not going to be reimbursed. It's no fault of the clubs. It's really poor form from the Premier League. It's poor leadership. And they've overstated what any potential risk that they assumed could have happened. Like you say, now they've got this massive mess on their hands, and particularly the bigger clubs who have to contend with European football, a congested World Cup in the middle of the season. Then you've got all the competitions as well. If you go deep into the FA Cup or the EFL Cup, it's an absolute nightmare.
Do you think the Premier League can sort of go by, and look, I understand the huge operation the Premier League is one of the biggest sort of sporting organisations and businesses in the world, so I can understand there's logistics and sort of protocols that sort of go over my pay grade. But in terms of a little bit of transparency and sort of a bit of honesty in regards to sort of moving forward and sort of thinking on the fly, I sort of go back to UFC. There was a big UFC card over the weekend. There was this huge card, and so these crazy circumstances appeared in the 48 hours, 24 hours before the event. And it threw this whole event in absolute chaos. It looked like this pay-per-view was sort of going to go down the drain and maybe even cancel the event. The UFC said, okay, we've got a problem on our hands, a huge problem. What did they do? They reacted. They ended up sort of shuffling one or two things around and sort of ended up putting on a far better event than what they had in the first place. And I look at the games being postponed. This match against Manchester United and Leeds this week. Well, what other game is postponed due to the rail strike? Brighton versus Crystal Palace. What could you do? Now, maybe there's logistical things that make this an impossibility. What I would do, Larry, I'd think on my feet. Okay, you don't want to play Man United and Leeds because of the police an issue. Well, Brighton and Palace don't have a game either. Palace, come up to play Man United. Brighton, you play Leeds. Now, I understand that there are potentially issues I'm sort of overlooking, but I just think that is something where the Premier League, with a little bit of foreseeable thinking and sort of a bit of sort of feel-good attitude and a sort of go-get-'em sort of approach, that could have been done. Now, I'm just thinking...
I think it'd be difficult. I think that'd be difficult in theory because we also have to remember that because these fixtures are planned well in advance, particularly with away ticket balloting, it'd be quite difficult to change the fixtures around.
But in regards to the show going ahead now, I don't agree with this. But again, you look at the player welfare sort of debate which we had. If you look forward now, I don't want to say but play a game behind closed doors. It's the last thing. However, in regards to the player welfare and sort of continuing this season and getting it all done before the World Cup or after the World Cup, could there have been a situation now? Yes, it's not ideal. Play it behind closed doors, get the game done.
Yeah, see that's the thing. It's a really difficult one. There's no perfect solution. Look, I think fundamentally this comes down to the Premier League acted prematurely and poorly last week. And because of that, they've built a difficult situation for themselves. No one was talking about, because the thing is, if the Premier League continues last week, there's no talk of postponement or delaying a football match. So then this conversation around not having enough police presence for Leeds versus Man United wouldn't even be a conversation. And also, you can't tell me there isn't enough police in the London workforce that can account for the funeral, with all due respect. You know what I mean? Are you seriously going to get police from Greater Manchester to travel down to London for this funeral event? I can't see that being the case.
See, that's what I can't see, but apparently that just looks like the case. That's the reason the match isn't going ahead.
I think the Premier League built a road for their own back because they've already been postponed for 1 week. That it was easy for the government or whoever to basically say, well, your event's already been shut down, just extend it for 1 more week and there'll be minimal damage. But hey, if you're Arsenal, you're not complaining, are you, sir?
We'll move it on to the football, and if you are in the live chat, do get your thoughts in regards to this. We're going to sort of talk Marcus Rashford and a few contract situations. Now, the other day,
do I have that right though? By the way, some Premier League clubs are playing this weekend. It's just not Man United.
Yeah, it's only United and Leeds.
Yeah.
That's it. And Chelsea, Liverpool. Now you can understand potentially there'll be a huge crowd in regards to it's away at Stamford Bridge for Liverpool, so it's in London, big crowd. I don't know if that's the day of the funeral or the day before, so you can understand. Okay, even I could see that. Okay, logistically, that's the biggest game in London. But Arsenal are playing Brentford. That's in London, so yeah, it makes no sense whether other games can go ahead and Manchester United versus Leeds can't. Yeah. But it is the cards we have been dealt. So we'll move on. And a couple of days ago, I talked about Manchester Evening News. I think broke a story that 5 players are going to come up for automatic contract renewals. Now, I think they are just sort of automatic extensions. I don't think there are sort of negotiations for these players. I think the club hold an option to extend players' contracts by a year. And those 5 players are De Gea, Diego Dalot, Fred, Luke Shaw, and Marcus Rashford. Now, Larry, you can answer this in regards to answer all 5 together or break them down specifically, however you feel fit. Thoughts on this? Is this good business in regards to the club? Okay, protecting their assets, extending these contracts, or is this going behind Eric Ten Hag's back and extending contracts he potentially doesn't want extended? Or is Ten Hag the one behind this saying, no, I'm happy for these extensions? Just your thoughts when you did hear that news.
Well, is this that they would be looking to exercise that extension, or that these players have an extension and a decision needs to be made? I guess that's where I'm with it. Ten Hag definitely needs to be consulted on this. I think this is where United got stuck in a trap under Ed Woodward's leadership, or lack thereof, you could argue. But Ten Hag needs to have a final say here. Now, I can also understand the perspective of, you know, the purpose of getting in a transfer fee. Fundamentally, it's not the contracts that United get an issue with. It's the wages that they pay the players. If there's an easy opportunity to get rid of a player off the books, I think you have to do it. With all due respect, and Tom, please correct me if I'm wrong. Tell me you wouldn't be enraged if Fred got a contract extension or Luke Shaw got a contract extension. These are the types of players you need to just be shipping them out. Get their wages off the book. That can be better utilized in a transfer fee, or you can balance out the squad if you get rid of those types of players. Because I mean, in terms of left backs, and maybe this is a lazy assessment from me, I like the young kid who's out on loan this season. He looked good last season. Fernandez, the
Alvaro
left back.
Fernandez.
Like, that might be an option where if you got a casting eye to the future, put that money into him. Let him be the up-and-coming left back. And let Luke Shaw go eat kebabs in Melbourne.
It's hard where I look at it, and it's one of my major criticisms in regards to Manchester United and transfer windows. I say, okay, this player doesn't deserve a contract, and we reward them. However, you ask the question in terms of, is it the right thing to do? And I think, well, I've just criticised the club for, not specifically in regards to these players, but the business in general. But then also do look at it, we'll think, well, okay, is the right thing to do by Fred is that should we be giving him a contract? One day I'll sit here and say no. However, then if he leaves for free, if he runs his contract down, I'm thinking, oh, hang on, why are we letting him go for free?
Now, what fee are you getting for Fred, realistically? Like, that's the thing. Like, how much do you value Fred at in the modern market? What's an acceptable price for Fred? £15 million? Like, who's paying more than £15 million?
Look, he's probably worth that. In regards to now, Manchester United couldn't sell him for 30. I think you'd try and sell him for 30.
You're not
now
selling
Manchester,
Fred for 30.
I know,
forget,
but that's the value. That's how I'd value him in regards to his ability. In regards to his ability, in regards to what you see other players go around, I think you could get someone desperate could go 30 or 40 million. And I'm not saying sell him. I'm just thinking in regards to if he is to leave for free, I can sit here and say, yeah, okay, football reasons only. Yeah, it's good if he walks out the door, Eric Ten Hag, and get a different player in. I know I'll be so critical, though, the moment he walks out the door for free, I'll be thinking, why haven't we pinned him down to a sort of contract or extended his contract so he could get 10 million, 15 million, and that could be reinvested in the squad. So I'm torn in that regard where I'm so critical of the club when they sort of do it. But if they don't do it, like, it's a catch-22 in my opinion.
The club need to be able to put their hand up and realize when they got it wrong. The reason we're in this situation is because we paid a 50 million transfer fee that we never should have paid for Fred in the first place. So you've already inflated his price from day one. He was never going to justify that. So cut your losses and accept you got that one wrong and let the guy move on. Tom, every time he takes the first touch, I feel it in Sydney. I feel that ball touch my backyard because he takes so long to get the ball under control and move it. Like, I seriously, I can't comprehend how this guy's made it to the top of European football. Like, credit to him, like, full respect to him. I'm sure he's a good bloke too. But in terms of pure footballing ability, he should be nowhere near Old Trafford. He shouldn't be anywhere near Old Trafford.
Look, in regards to Fred, there's no secret in regards to I've been highly critical of Fred over the years, but you cast your mind back 6 months to a year. And when a new manager comes in and he progressed under Ralph Rangnick and said, okay, if Eric Ten Hag comes in, maybe he's going to suit. Now, I'm not saying but that's what I mean. Are we a bit drastic? And look, I think we did as a fan base go over the top in regards to McFred, and we sort of paired them together. But both individually as well, I think the criticism was over the top with McTominay. I think we do the same with Fred. Now, it's hard because the type of player Fred is that I have huge frustrations with that type of player. So maybe that is why I sort of find myself maybe sort of overcritical of a player like Fred. But I think in regards to the fan base, here we were, as I said, when a couple of months ago under Ralph Rangnick saying he was our strongest player at the end of last season. Now, at any stage, now, yes, we were poor, but at any stage, if you were the strongest player at Manchester United, you have something about you. I know we're at rock bottom. I know we were bad.
See, I don't know if you can say that because David De Gea got player of the seasons back-to-back for United being poor.
Goalkeepers aren't in a discussion.
But that's the argument, right? And the thing is, the same things that we praised De Gea for in those seasons are the same things we're critical of him for now. He's a good shot stopper. He was always a good shot stopper. But he's not good in terms of playing out the ball in his feet, commanding his area, etc. So if David De Gea makes a good save tomorrow, we can't also be saying, well, he should get player of the season because we kept a clean sheet or we got 3 points because of that one crucial save. It needs to be assessing the player's entirety of his performance. Fred put in good performances, and I'm guilty of this too. I praised him at times, and let's not rewrite history. Fred is capable of good moments. You don't make it at this level of football if you're not capable of good moments. But in terms of I think what the biggest benefit of Ten Hag's system is it rewards football. So when a player isn't a good footballer, they become exposed very quickly. And I think that's where Fred's probably suffering now. Under Ralph Rangnick and even Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Fred was almost protected in that system. Now you're being required to play the ball out, beat the press. These are simply abilities he's not capable of.
So who's this decision? Is this the club making a business decision, or do you think Erik Ten Hag, is this behind Erik Ten Hag's back, or do you think this has Ten Hag's blessing? How do you think this has sort of played out?
Well, I think this is going to be a true test of Richard Arnold, John Murtaugh, and the footballing department now, because Ten Hag financially has been backed like no other manager has been backed before in terms of the player recruitment side. He got in 2 players who were his last season at a different club. And
not true. Look, I completely agree and continue your point, but not true backing Erik Ten Hag in regards to, okay, you're our manager, we're going to give you everything you want. They did it through panic. They weren't going to sign Anthony and Casemiro. They weren't going to do it. If we didn't have that start to the season, Casemiro and Anthony aren't Man United players.
Well, yeah, that's a valid point, but nonetheless, it happened, right?
Yeah, so yeah. Ultimately, it did happen. Yeah,
and even if it didn't, if you look at the player, like there's backing the manager with money, like the way Mourinho was in the first season, and there's still to this day talk of whether he really, like Pogba would have happened either way. Is the way we're led to believe that story was going. But you look in terms of he was backed financially, but it was every player United got were players Erik Ten Hag wanted. It wasn't a want list on Richard Arnold's CEO marketing dream list. You know what I mean? So that's the difference here. So if that's the case, if you're going to back this guy to build the squad he wants, building the squad also includes consulting him on who you're extending contracts of. And if he's decided Fred isn't going to play football, based on the amount of game time Fred has gotten already, it's very clear to me he doesn't favor the Brazilian. So there is no reason to extend his contract. United have gotten so much wrong over the last decade. So instead of holding on to the mistakes that we've made, literally, it's time to accept your losses and cut those players, including the likes of Fred and Luke Shaw. That
was my next question to you, and you just answered it there. But I was just going to say, are you just as a fan, or if you're the manager, just going to cut your losses and just say, okay, it's the wrong decision to let Fred go for free. We should be getting a fee. However, in regards to the situation moving forward.
Well, I think they're the only 2 players that are questioned here. I think we all agree you'd extend Diogo Dalot, you extend Marcus Rashford, and I think Cristiano Ronaldo is on this list as well. I don't know if
he has a potential 3rd year. So yeah, he is. He wasn't listed in the 5, but he is a player who Man United can extend that contract. Now I think that's obviously it's a tricky situation at the moment, but there is a situation where United can extend that.
So if I'm looking at those players, I think the ones that United do extend are Diogo Dalot, Marcus Rashford, and Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, the debate on Ronaldo is an interesting one because, one, he did push hard to leave. But in Ronaldo, despite his age, there is transfer value there. I think the interesting
I don't think there's transfer value in Ronaldo in regards to what it will take a club to take the wage in terms of paying his wages.
I don't think difficult with him.
I don't think there is.
Because I bring this point back to you. Well, I think the thing with Ronaldo is a really difficult one to predict. I think we'll have a better idea toward February, March.
I don't know if it's Champions League or not.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's the aspect of do we qualify for Champions League? But more importantly, has he been able to force his way into this starting 11? Because at the current moment, you have to say Marcus Rashford and Martial are the preferred strikers. So, it's not all, like we've said multiple times now, it's not all Ronaldo's way this time. He's going to have to work hard to fight his way back in, a challenge he probably hasn't had to deal with since he was 18, 19 years of age. So it'll be interesting to see how he responds.
You mentioned Marcus Rashford a few times in the live chat. Do get your thoughts in on Marcus Rashford. 2 things. We can tie the contract discussion in here if you want. Obviously, maybe a little bit more specifically into him having, or the club having the option to extend a year. But also in regards to a little bit of injury news, there has been sort of 1 or 2 rumours that he did pick up an injury. Now, it could potentially have been in the Arsenal match. I think he did sort of potentially limp off towards the end, off to the sideline, and Erik Ten Hag sort of, I think he even might have gone down the tunnel early. I'm not quite sure. So there is a little bit of an injury cloud. He probably won't play against his game against Sheriff in the Europa League in a couple of days' time. It'll be interesting to see. But in regards to injuries and Marcus Rashford, I think Anthony Martial did an interview where he was talking about Jose Mourinho and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Martial was quite critical. I think, I haven't read the interview, but I think it was throughout the time with Solskjaer saying, I played through injury and I shouldn't have played. And we obviously know how Solskjaer sort of ran Marcus Rashford into the ground, unfortunately. So he ended up playing technically with a broken back at times. And obviously Marcus, we remember that Liverpool game where everyone was sort of kicked off the park and he was limping around. He played and he should have played. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer came in for so much criticism throughout the week, both from Anthony Martial and sort of wider aspects of the media. I just want your thoughts on that, because one, that is clear, Marcus Rashford has played through injury, which we can commend sort of as fans. That's what we want. We want players to push through, but we also need players to sort of be responsible and look after their careers and obviously look after the best interests of Manchester United. And it's no good fighting through the pain barrier for 30, 40 minutes in one game if you're going to miss the next 6 weeks. You do have to sort of weigh these things up. Now, I just want your thoughts and tie Martial and Marcus Rashford into this same discussion. Being critical of the manager, let's say Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, I think as a player, you need to take responsibility. Look at Wayne Rooney against Bayern Munich all those years ago under Sir Alex Ferguson. Clearly injured, walking around on one leg. Sir Alex played him the next week. And it was Wayne Rooney's decision. It was the wrong decision by Wayne Rooney. If a player makes himself available, the player knows his body better than himself. The player knows his body better than the manager. And he knows it better than the physio. I know the physios are experts, but you're the one who feels the injury. You're the one who knows your body. And I'm just thinking, man, Anthony Martial and Marcus Rashford in this case, I don't think they're right to be sort of pointing fingers elsewhere. Now, that's not to be too critical. I do commend sort of playing through injuries at times, but you do need to sort of, you look at Marcus Rashford's situation. We've talked about him sort of having that surgery before, or putting off the surgery to allow himself to go to the Euros. Sort of thing.
Yeah,
and I'm just thinking, in my opinion, the ball is in your court as a player, not the manager.
I agree with you in theory, but players want to play, and that's ultimately what you want to do. If you can imagine being a kid playing around in the local park with your mates, like I've pushed through the injury barrier in park football because I want to play, I want to contribute. You know what I mean? So in theory, yes, I agree with you, but I think ultimately, because you are a professional organization, there is a responsibility to think of the players' long-term welfare. If Martial's, he mentioned he couldn't accelerate for the first 4 months of the season or something like that. And that might have been, around for someone who does rely on acceleration, it must be said, and agility. If that contributed to why we saw such a poor goal return in that season where we're behind closed doors, then I think it is right to criticize the manager, to be honest. But what I will say is, in the Martial case specifically, see, I think the journalist has kind of let us down a little bit, because there's follow-up questions to ask there. What I would potentially be asking is, was the manager aware that you weren't able to accelerate? Were you telling the physios that you were able to do something that you weren't? How long did the injury last for? You mentioned you couldn't accelerate in the first lockdown season. How about the following season, the one where he had his shaved head and Ronaldo was there? You also displayed poor form there. Did you have an injury, or was that purely down to form? So I think there are some follow-up questions that the journalist could have questioned to Martial to address, because it's not quite clear on whether Solskjaer was actually aware he was injured or not. So if he's made himself available and Solskjaer saying you're available, or I'm going to play you, then you can't blame Ole Gunnar Solskjaer for that. Now, if the Norwegian now is aware that he couldn't accelerate and said, look, mate, I need you to push through, and then in turn he puts in a poor performance, then, I equally think then Martial has a right to be filthy.
Yeah, definitely. Look, to be honest, I haven't read the interview. I've just sort of seen tweets and sort of the headlines sort of thing. So it is something I'll sort of go back and have a look at in regards to, you mention the line of questioning from the journalist. But just before we wrap up, there is a name now, sort of forgive me in regards to the pronunciation. Do correct me if I'm wrong, but a player used to be at that, is that Madrid? Yeah, Atletico Madrid from memory. Santiago Arias, I'm not quite sure. Colombian right back. Without a club at the moment, is available on a free transfer. Now, it doesn't look like it's from anywhere sort of concrete, but it's from a few sort of South American sources, and I think some sources in Spain as well, in regards to Erik ten Hag has a liking. Apparently, there's a bit of a connection there. I don't know if he played in the Eredivisie or not, but they're saying is there's some type of connection with Erik ten Hag. There obviously was sort of interest in and around a right-back situation at Man United. Aaron Wan-Bissaka didn't leave the club. He stayed at the club, so it'll be interesting. Does that sort of scupper any chances of this Colombian coming in at right-back? But ultimately, Erik ten Hag has had an interest in sort of bringing in someone to challenge Diogo Dalot, because Aaron Wan-Bissaka is definitely not that player in Erik ten Hag's eyes. Transfer window has shut, Larry, but Everton just signed a goalkeeper. The free transfers are still available. We saw Juan Matic obviously move to Galatasaray. Players can still move outside these windows if they're currently without a club. Do you see a situation where Erik ten Hag could bring someone in on free transfer? And at the moment, it does look potentially, if there is going to be one, it's going to be this kid. Not kid. I think he's 30 years old, to be fair.
I think it's unlikely, Tom. I think United, whoever's in that squad now, I think remains. What I will say is, I totally agree on Wan-Bissaka being out of favour. The fact that he moved Lindelof to right back,
Yeah.
and not just that, he didn't do well, Lindelof. He got skinned a couple times by the winger, and I just thought, man, if you're Wan-Bissaka, that's got to hurt a little bit. So. Don't know what he does, but at the end of the day, Wan-Bissaka is there. He is a right back, and I think you got to utilize him. But I got to say, if I'm Erik Ten Hag now, whether he's told him to work on something in training or not, we're not privy to that. But I actually think that's poor management of the squad. To be honest, I think Lindelof hasn't played right back since his Benfica days, so it wasn't the right move for me.
But if you don't trust the play, if you don't trust Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and you trust
you can trust Wan-Bissaka in regards to a defensive job, though. I mean, fullback is the safest place you could probably be in terms of playing the ball out. You can get around Wan-Bissaka.
I agree, and I don't want to. So we can bring a sort of bash Liverpool discussion into this, but you throw in Alexander-Arnold and you look at the issues he causes Liverpool defensively in regards to he's not doing his job properly. If Erik Ten Hag doesn't, now I'm not saying Aaron Wan-Bissaka defends like that, but if Erik Ten Hag doesn't have full trust in the player, I'm just thinking we've seen how dangerous that sort of area of the pitch is if your right back's not doing the job the manager wants. And I'm just thinking that is potentially where, and I'm not too critical of Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Look, I like him. Now, I do probably agree that his time is potentially up at Man United, and I would look to offload him. But it is a weird situation. We talk about Erik Ten Hag sort of maybe not favouring Fred. You're clearly right in regards to saying top of that list in terms of non-preferred players is the right back.
Well, I think if you want defensive assurance, I think Wan-Bissaka can be your guy. He's got some positional problems. I mean, again, I'm only going off last season. But I think he's more than capable of being a deputy to Diogo Dalot.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about this guy being one of the best fullbacks in England at one point. You know what I mean? Like, he's got his limitations on the ball and it bounces off him a little bit. But, I mean, I think Fred is more of a liability in the middle of the pitch. And I don't think Wan-Bissaka's first touch is any worse.
Wan-Bissaka's touch is better. It looks worse, though. I think Fred obviously has that ability to look like a footballer. Wan-Bissaka looks quite awkward. But George bringing up in regards to the connection with Erik Ten Hag and that Santiago Arias, he played with PSV. Yeah, there was a Dutch connection in there as well. Before we wrap up, Larry, anything else to discuss in regards? There is no football. We'll probably do a preview tomorrow in regards to the Sheriff game coming up in the Europa League. So do stay tuned for that this time tomorrow. But anything else Man United related sort of I've missed or that's caught your eye over the last couple of days?
I'm so pumped for this game against Sheriff. I'm going to treat it like it's the Champions League final because it's the last time we're going to see United for, 3 weeks? Because we've got the international break now.
The international break. Well, you talk about that and maybe a little bit tongue-in-cheek in regards to, okay, it's away in Moldova against Sheriff. Now, Sheriff did beat Real Madrid, obviously, famously. I think it was last season. But however, in saying that, we are bottom of the group. We did lose against Real Sociedad. So it is a must-win game. It's a big game now.
United need to finish top of the group. I actually think it'd be a disaster if we come second because in what already is going to be such a congested fixture list, like I said, if you come second in this group, you're going to that round of 32. And United don't want to be there in what's already going to be a really hectic season. So, and look, I think United can still finish top. I think on another day, you get a draw out of that match. I mean, enough's been made out of the VAR decision, but it's must win for United. And, we'll obviously do our preview, but I think with all of this fixture conjecture and what all the going ons, I think it will be a much different side to what we would have said a week ago.
Oh, yeah. No, it has to be, especially with the no football on the weekend. I think you do need to, and with the position we find ourselves in needing a win, I think you need to go full strength. I expect it'll be interesting to see what happens. Borche here from the football capital games at the worst time, 2:45. Yeah. I didn't realise that, but obviously potentially over in Eastern Europe, we were going to get that rough kickoff time on a Friday morning. And George here, I hope we aren't sloppy. And so, there needs to be a reaction. And
I think we'll be sharp because the amount of time they'd be getting.
We need to be sharp.
Yeah.
And that is where I point, okay, yes, we do need to look at the players and we need to demand from the players. But this is where I look at Erik Ten Hag in a positive way. I'm not critical. I don't have any concerns. But this is where I look at Erik Ten Hag and say, okay, this is what you're here for. Poor performance against Sociedad. How did you fix this? We saw him fix it against Brentford. Whatever he did, waved a magic wand. He somehow fixed it in a miraculous fashion. And I'm just thinking, okay, the loss against Sociedad wasn't in the same fashion as the loss against Brentford. I actually thought we were decent at times against Sociedad. I thought it was just one of those games. Sociedad got a dodgy penalty and won the match. But Eric Ten Hag, this is where he earns his money. Okay, United didn't get the job done. How does he sort of get the message across back to the players to go and fix the problem?
Well, what I'm pumped about, I think Martial should be back for this game, which I'm definitely excited to see.
Well, we'll discuss tomorrow in regards to potential returns. Obviously, potentially Marcus Rashford will be out, but we'll discuss Anthony Martial, the back four, etc. will be very interesting. Maybe Dubravka comes in for De Gea. I highly doubt that, but it is a must-win game. But that'll be probably this time tomorrow. We'll do a preview, so do stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe if you're new. And in regards to, well, Larry's just gone off. He's happy with the chat already. But I was just going to say in regards to making sure you are subscribed, over the weekend, there is no football. We're playing, obviously, against Leeds United. Well, we're supposed to play against Leeds United, but no football, as Larry